So I'm about to start the finishing sanding with a machine that I've never actually used before. This is the HSS, or well, I'm hiring it from HSS. I'm not actually sure who manufactures this, but it's called the Sand Glider. And each one of these discs, I think, orbits or spins, and it's going to provide us the surface area and abrasion we need to get the floor flat and smooth. So the final sanding that I did on the floor sander and the edger was 80 grit. My general rule of thumb, as I said before, because the finishing sanders produce a smoother finish, it means they're not quite as aggressive. So I always drop down a grit. So I'm dropping down to a 60 grit and getting it nice and flat and smooth, and then working my way up from there. So I'm going to do 60 grit, 80 grit, and then 120 grit, and that's going to provide us a nice smooth surface. So one thing, when I got this Velcro skirt was overhanging the abrasives. I've just pulled it off and adjusted it so it can be as level with the abrasives as possible. For optimum dust extraction, you want it to be touching the floor, but you don't want it to be getting under the abrasives. So especially if the abrasives start chewing it up, and then you get charged for the Velcro skirt. So this is one of the great things about the finishing sanders, is they tend to highlight these dips where the edging, any of the sanding is imperfect. So you can see where you need to keep working at it to get it clean. So you can see all the way along here where that edge sander was a little bit warped. It's created these dips coming from the middle of the disc. So I've got to try and smooth these out now. So. But that's the good thing about the finishing sanding, it allows you to see it. So I skipped doing the edge a bit because you know, it's just a bit monotonous. You saw what I was doing, and all I do is just keep going over the edge until it's smooth. And once the edges are smooth, then you just go up and down. Right now, again, I've never used this before, but I'm just what I'm doing is, because I know that the discs are here and here, I'm just going up and down the floor, making sure that these two discs go over one board. So I go up this board, then down this board, then up this board. Forgetting about these two discs, I'm just making sure that I cover every board. And when you come up with little dings in the floor like this bit here, and it highlights it because the fine dust collects in the little dent, then I just keep going over it until I've grinded it out. But once I've got that out, going over the bulk of the floor is fairly quick. So I just thought I'd record this bit as well so you could see. So as you can see, just here where I've been over it, it's highlighted these lines that have been left in the floor by the drum sander. You probably won't get much of these because your floor won't have been as horrendously uneven as mine was, but if you do, as I said, the finishing sander highlights them so you can go over and get them nice and smooth. So. So that's the first grit of the finished sanding done, and if you could take a little look, you might see that it's actually, even though it's 60 grit, this is an extremely smooth surface. I have to say I'm pretty impressed with that machine. But if you're not staining your floor, I mean, this is good enough to lacquer easily. I mean, you're light years ahead of any DIY refinisher, and probably ahead of 50% of professional finishers if you can get it to look like this. So as I say, I'm quite impressed with this machine. It's got a lot of grunt. I still wouldn't sand a floor with it though. I'd still use a drum sander and an edge sander to get the floor clean and flattish, and then use a finishing sander to get it to look like this. So but because I want to demonstrate what can be done with with rental tools, I am going to be going higher up the grits and then staining the floor, because staining really shows up the imperfections. So I'm going to be staining it and lacquering it so we can see how smooth it is and just how many scratches are left in the surface and how perfect it looks. So next is 80 grit. So that's the 80 grit on the finishing sanding done. On a different machine, I think I'd definitely go to at least 100 grit, but the 60 grit was very smooth, and I mean I can't see any scratches. So no, it was dust. It's just so smooth. I'm happy to stain this. So now we've done we did the 80 grit, the final floor sanding. We did the 80 grit edge sanding. We did the 80 grit corner sanding, and then we did the 60 grit on this. We made sure it was all completely flat and clean. The subsequent grits on the finishing sander, it's always the first grit that you've got to take the time and get it flat and smooth. Going up the grits after that, it's just a case of slowly walking over the floor. It doesn't take anywhere near as much time. So. But as I say, so this is smooth enough for me. I'm happy with this. What I'm just going to do finally is rub down the edge of the floor with a 120 grit paper. Now the reason I'm doing this is, what I would normally use is a palm sander or a random orbital sander like the Festool Rotex, but Festool Rotex is $500, so I imagine you're not going to have one of those. So it takes a little bit more time, but you just rub it down very lightly around the edges, which I'm going to do now, and that'll just make sure that the edges are slightly smoother so they don't show up with a stain. So I'm just going to fold it like this, so that I can grip it, and then this bit so it gets a little bit more tricky. You don't want to go against the grain like this, because it's obviously going to scratch across the fibres of the grain. You want to go with the grain like this, which is why it's a bit more of a pain on these on the ends of the boards rather than down the sides. So because you've got to do this tiny little rubbing like this. That's all done, so we're ready to stain now, and that's what we're going to be doing in the next video.